Kevin, I'm going to toss it to you first because Iowa ultimately lost this game. They lost their second national championship in a row. They complete the revenge tour after they beat the Hawkeyes, who knocked them out in the Final Four last year. The Gamecocks ultimately win 87-75, and Dawn Staley earns her third national championship in the last 7 seasons. And so just what were your takeaways from the women's natty, Kevin?
Man, Dawn Staley. I've been a casual, I'm going to admit. Shaun has been keeping me up to date. It started last March Madness, when we did the brackets. He's like, Kevin, you got to do it. So now I've been kind of paying attention to the game. But Dawn Staley, man, like Shaun mentioned, 3 championships in 7 years, 6 Final Fours in 7 years, 16 SEC championship games, 12 25-plus win seasons to go along with 7 30-plus win seasons. Her last 111 games, she's 108-3. So, yeah, Dawn Staley is legit. And South Carolina is no joke. Like Shaun mentioned, is the revenge tour. And the lady, I'm forgetting her name, who won most outstanding player. I don't know if you guys remember. I know Deshaun definitely does. But when they played Iowa and Caitlin Clark kind of just waved her off. And so to see that kind of come to life, bro, the storylines, I said it last week, like you come for the stories, but you stay for the ball, man. The ball is legit. I'm going to come on here every time and definitely give them their flowers because they deserve it. And the numbers showed it. I think it was 12.9 million. So that was more than the men's national championship. So the viewers are definitely getting there. And I've been seeing it a lot, I think it was the 2019 class when all of them were freshmen would bring all of them were, and they were talking about how that freshman class kind of changed college basketball, man. And it just sucks because you can only imagine what Paige would have been those 2 seasons that she played. Like, college basketball is already so intensified, and if she would have been healthy, like, just to run off of that. But enough about South Carolina, man. Caitlin Clark is going to go down as one of the best to ever do it. She literally willed this team to a national championship game when no one thought it was going to be possible. We all knew that they had Caitlin Clark, and she went out there and she did her thing, but it comes to show that. And we've talked about as we've been following the Women's March Madness, they just needed more girls to step up. And sometimes, as the 3 of us know, the lights get too bright sometimes. I came on here and gave a lot of credit to the role players in the game versus USC, and then we haven't talked about the game versus UConn, but they stepped up against that game too. And it's like when the lights get the brightest, you have to show up. And Caitlin Clark's going to show up, and it was really sad to see him go out. It would have been great, Disney storyline. If you've been watching the show, I'm always one for a Disney story. I'm always here for the underdog, and unfortunately, I've been let down again. So maybe we'll get our Disney Channel ending next year.
Yeah, we won't get it with Caitlin Clark, but honestly, we got it with Dawn Staley because her post-game speech absolutely just touched my heart, where she just touched on the adversity that the team had gone through, the fact that one of her favorite all-time players, Aaliyah Boston's right there in that same conversation with Asia Wilson on the impact that she had during her time at South Carolina. And for Aaliyah Boston to get eliminated in the Final Four last year, they went in undefeated, and they lost to Caitlin Clark in the Final Four last year. Aaliyah Boston has to go to the WNBA without being a reigning national champion. And so, as Dawn Staley said after the game, for the first time, she's sending one of her top draft picks to the W as a reigning champion. And that player is Camila Cardozo, the MVP that you alluded to, Kevin. And I also wanted to talk about Raven Johnson, because that's another player that you alluded to. Raven Johnson is the one who got waved off by Caitlin Clark last year in the Final Four. Caitlin Clark absolutely cooked her. She torched her, and that's, out of all due respect to Raven Johnson, because Caitlin Clark is her. Like, to put it simply, she is her, and she is a generational talent. So much so that the reigning back-to-back WNBA champions, the Las Vegas Aces, who usually play a Michelob Ultra arena in Vegas, about a 12,000-seat arena, they have already started plans to play at T-Mobile next year, only when the Indiana Fever come to town with their presumed number 1 overall pick being Caitlin Clark. That's how much of a transcendent player that Caitlin Clark is. But Raven Johnson, she took the adversity. She said after last year's game, she didn't even want to play basketball anymore. Like, it hurt her that much to have the performance that she did defensively against Caitlin Clark. And in this game, Raven Johnson went 1 of 11 offensively. You look at that stat line, not great at all. But it's because she gave literally everything that she had to guarding Caitlin Clark. And Caitlin Clark had an amazing first quarter. 18 points for Caitlin Clark in the first quarter. South Carolina had 20 at the end of the first quarter. Like, that's how much of a tear Caitlin Clark came out on. And then for the rest of the game, Caitlin Clark is held to 12 points over the next 3 quarters. And a lot of that had to do with Raven Johnson. And just shout out to her because she really took the adversity on the chin and it made her better as a person and as a player. And so credit to her for shutting down one of the greatest college basketball players the women's game has ever seen. And also, this is exactly why when LSU played Iowa, even though I agree that Haley Van Lith should not have been the primary defender on a Caitlin Clark, mainly just because Caitlin Clark is like 7 inches taller than her. Also, I wouldn't say that Flau'jae Johnson should have been the one who was on her the entire game because Raven's offensive stat line kind of proved why. She didn't have any legs. She was going to shoot the ball, and she wasn't afraid to do that, but she literally gave everything she had to defense, and that's what Flau'jae would have had to do in the Elite Eight, and then we wouldn't have seen those 23 points from Flau'jae Johnson. And so just an all-around performance, in my opinion, Gary, from the South Carolina team. They really proved that when you have a unit, even if they're all young, except for really a Camila Cardozo who had time on the bench sitting behind an Aaliyah Boston. But Gary, just what did you think of this national championship game? The fact that Dawn Staley is building a dynasty over there in South Carolina, but also the fact that Caitlin Clark literally changed the game forever.
To be honest with you, as Kevin said, Shaun, you're the correspondent for this one. We're just novice here, and I'm just glad that, like you said, you guys said everything perfectly where they just have literally all the different storylines that women's college basketball created now going into, like you just mentioned, the Indiana Fever and WNBA going to get that big surge from Caitlin Clark doing her thing on this level and really just bringing a whole lot of eyeballs in. It's funny, it's crazy. I work at a restaurant too, so literally, some people were just coming in, which never see, talking about turn that on, turn that game on, things of that nature. I watched it, really come in. People even that people that don't even watch sports usually, are casuals in sports, are really were tuned in. So just seeing, obviously Kevin mentioned the number earlier of how many viewerships this had, and compared to NBA finals and college football championship games and things of that nature, it was really cool to see. And like you, Shaun said too, it's a good product. At the end of the day, we're getting eye open to seeing good basketball being played, and I'm glad there's no stigma of people that have that whole old school mindset, they're not dunking. So while we're watching, you know what I'm saying? Just hell, if you're a real hooper,
I've been fighting that for years.
It's you go to the park. How many people were dunking when you were a kid? You know what I'm saying? Majority of the time, only people that ever dunk is you see on TV or the NBA players, and now everyone in the league is not dunking every possession now. You know what I'm saying? There's only a few guys who get to dunk or get 2-3 dunks a game. That's the over explosive, unnatural talent type of guys. You know what I'm saying? So other than that, seeing pure basketball being played. Obviously there's different levels of basketball, but then just you can see them playing as a team. There's just so many different things that I feel was shown on this level on all aspects of all these great players, like you guys named, all these players named Caitlin Clark and the Cardosa, and then obviously Paige Buckner, and you've seen all the Angel Reese. There's so many. I know you guys obviously talked about Juju Watkins last week and what she's doing at USC. So there's so many players coming up that I feel it's creating a perfect trend or some people to follow, and all these people are well spoken and great ambassadors for the game. You know what I'm saying? I feel it's clicking on all cylinders, and I'm just glad that it's creating a thing, a must-watch type of event in women's sports. So hopefully the trickle down keeps happening because they deserve it, and that's how those problems that everyone was not complaining about, but asking for terms of pay and things like that. WNBA players maybe don't have to go overseas to go get that same type of pay to come back here. All those things of that nature. Hopefully that can start trickling down and helping out. And this all can be helpful for everybody at the end of the day, because why not? More sports being played. We all know we all love sports. This weekend there was not. If this was entertainment, Asha was telling was texting WWE look would have been entertaining. You know what I'm saying? Something, I don't know about you guys, but every weekend people like to watch, especially here in the USA. Everywhere, pretty much around the world though. At the end of the day, your free time with your family and stuff. The only thing we are scheduled to watch nowadays is scheduled television is sports. So when there's something good going on in sports and there's great storylines, like Kev said, and like Shaun said, there's good actual basketball being played and things to watch, you're going to be drawn to it. So there's nothing really negative to say. Anyone who would have won, I feel would have had a good storyline. That's how everything is good. Okay, If Iowa would have won, Caitlin Clark. If obviously if South Carolina they got the 38-0, like you already mentioned, the coach and what she done and what she's proven to be, and the other two teams that I'm obviously forgetting right now who are played on Friday night who lost. Oh, NC State, that would have been the underdog story, obviously, and then UConn, then barely even having any players and getting to this point, and you know what I'm saying. So it would have been no matter what, it would have been a good story ending. So that's why I think that makes women's college basketball so cool right now. Like it literally doesn't matter. We could talk the X's and O's. We could talk about this call, that call, what should have happened. But at the end of the day, this is just as simple like a positive conversation with this one right here. Like really nothing bad to say about it.
Yeah, and I mentioned Raven Johnson earlier, who was the primary defender on Caitlin Clark. If you take away Raven Johnson's 1 for 11 shooting line, then the rest of the South Carolina team shot 55% from the field. Like that's how on point this entire roster was.
Snackers.
And the one player who just the one player who was giving her all defensively kind of skewed the stat line. But even with her 1 for 11, they shot almost 48%. And so that's still pretty good as a team. And I've talked a lot about Raven Johnson, but I also want to highlight someone else. Another Johnson from South Carolina, Tessa Johnson, who was a freshman guard, came off the bench, and she had a team high in this game with 19 points on 7 of 11 from the field, 3 of 6 from three-point territory, 4 rebounds, and an assist. Man, like you said earlier, when the lights are the brightest, some players rise to the occasion, some don't. Tessa certainly did in this game. And the scary part about this South Carolina team is that aside from Camila Cardozo, who's going to be a top 5 pick in the WNBA draft coming up in like a week-ish, like women's basketball doesn't end here. The WNBA draft is coming up in like a week. And then the season, but Garry, then the season starts a month from now. And I get what you're saying, there shouldn't be any break, but logistics. That's why there's a break.
No, I'm saying it sucks for them. They get no break. Literally.
Well, yeah, the college players, Yeah, the college players, it's an intense grind.
That's good for Indiana. I just thought about Caitlin Clark and Tyler Halliburton in the state. That's going to be for them, goddamn. That's going to be good for them, man.
It is really cool. Yeah, and so aside from Camila Cardozo, this entire South Carolina team is coming back next year. And so they very easily could win back-to-back championships 3 and 4 years. Like if it weren't for Caitlin Clark, Dawn Staley easily could have just completed a three-peat right now. But Caitlin Clark was such a game changer.
Just kind of like the UConn type of. It's kind of like the UConn type vibe when they were kind of rolling. And what's the difference between that and this? I feel like there's probably more actually competitors against them. Obviously, you know what I'm saying? Because obviously they had a squad too with Brittany and everything like them dominating for years. I remember that. So.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I would say that, yes, this is similar just in the sense of like how great of a coach Dawn Staley is and how dynastic her team could be if they reach their full potential. But they already haven't reached their full potential because if they did, they would have three-peated last year. But they fell short last year. And that's why even though you see a team like South Carolina winning every single game by double digits, we're about to talk about the UConn men who won every single game by double digits on their way to back-to-back national championships. That's why we shouldn't just overlook like how easy it was for these teams, because you can easily slip up and then your undefeated season, like we saw for the Gamecocks last year, comes to an end. Yeah, and Aaliyah Boston's college career suddenly comes to an end unexpectedly. But the main difference, I would say, even though the South Carolina team has a chance to be dynastic, the main difference, as you said, was the fact that there are more competitors out there. There's a Juju Watkins at USC. There's obviously Paige Beckers and AZ Fudd if she gets back to the court over at UConn. And then now you look at Kentucky. You just had the head coach from Virginia Tech go over to Kentucky, as well as Georgia Amore, their top point guard. And so there are plenty of teams around the country that will compete against the South Carolina team. But South Carolina should definitely be the favorite. However, I'm here to tell you guys right now, before we move on to the men, that I don't think South Carolina is going to go back-to-back and win 3 out of 4 next year. I think that ultimately I think that ultimately if UConn is able to stay healthy and they have the tag team of fifth-year senior Paige Beckers and like junior AZ Fudd, then I think that that's the team to beat. Even though they're losing an Aaliyah Edwards who's graduating, I think that UConn would potentially be the team to beat next year. But again, here we are, and someone like me who you guys give high praise to when it comes to my fandom of WNBA basketball and women's college basketball. Here I am, I guess, disrespecting them by overlooking South Carolina already. So we'll see. I just love the growth that we saw from the game this year. And earlier we mentioned the 12.3 million people who tuned in for the Elite Eight when it was LSU versus Iowa. Garry, you thought that was a lot until there was like 18.7 that tuned in for this women's national championship. And gentlemen, this is where we'll leave it. For the first time ever, the women's college basketball national championship game had more viewers than the men's. We're no longer just talking about it. Like, we just kept talking about how there were personalities in the women's game because they stayed for multiple years and that drives more interest. That's the reality now. This is stats over politics. The numbers don't lie. And the women's game was far more entertaining, at least in my opinion, than the men's game this year. But now, guys, let's get to the men's game because you guys know I could talk about women's basketball all night. And so we'll keep it